In this video, we're going to complete our first laboratory exercise and talk about Visual Studio, OpenGL, DLL, and linker library files. And I am using Windows operating system and Visual Studio integrated development environment to show you my examples of OpenGL programming. So to get started, we need to discuss a typical project configuration that would allow us to run OpenGL. And our first laboratory exercise demonstrates how an executable program makes use of Windows DLLs and linker libraries to run 3D graphics programs. So dynamic link libraries, DLL files, represent themselves as a set of precompiled functions, and they can be reused by multiple programs. So for example, here we have a couple of DLL files in part of our laboratory configuration, and one of them is called freeglut.dll and another one is glue32.dll. And when I build my OpenGL program using a already pre-configured project, you can see that the executable file is placed in this directory where side by side with these two DLLs, so that it will allow us to load these DLLs together with our executable file into memory and be able to start calling functions that are available in these DLLs. Now, in our C++ code, we have access to header files. We can include them, but these header files do not contain any executable code. They only declare functions that are available inside these DLL files. So here's an example of includes that we can place. And there's only one more thing to be aware of, that although we can declare all sorts of functions inside C++ header files, since they're supplied by the DLLs, there's an extra step how to make them available to our executable program. And this is where the library files, the linker library files, come into place. Lib files are binary files used by the linker. These lib files are actually generated at the time when the DLL files are generated by the compiler or the entire build process. These binary files are used by the linker, and they help linker to locate functions in the DLL. So these are components that we need to be aware of when we're building programs that rely on the functionality of DLLs. Basically, our executable file has to be able to find the physical addresses of functions declared in header files and implemented in DLLs. So if I draw a diagram, so if this is our executable file, right? So this is our executable file, and this is a DLL file, and now both of them are loaded into memory. So DLL file is just a series of functions that are available to do various things, and the lib files are used by the linker as information about how our executable file can make calls into these libraries that are called dynamic link libraries. So this is where the library files come into place, and they have extension lib. So in this laboratory, we're just going to discuss all the project configuration parameters that we need to be able to do this assembly of the final product, the executable file that can use all of these available functions. So generally we need to configure the project and specify location of the header files and location of the library files. We also have to make sure that our executable can find the DLLs. And the simplest trick that you can use is just basically place your executable in the same location where the DLL files are located. So one specific thing that I do in my project configuration is that when we build our program, the output, the executable file that we generate, goes into this subfolder that already contains the DLL files. And so likewise, if I go to my build and I clean my solution to remove the results of the previous build, you can see that these executable files now gone. Right here they were just removed. So our OpenGL laboratory configuration needs a few simple decisions regarding where your OpenGL related project will be located on your drive. So you need to choose the drive, and this doesn't have to be some sort of fixed directory. Of course, remember that Windows refers to directories as folders. It's the same thing. I often say directory or folder. You can use both of these. So on my computer right here, you can see that I'm using location. The actual location of my laboratories is it's called GL262 Labs. You will be able to download it from the zip file. But my initial configuration is extremely simple. I just use CBCC. I don't even use this courses. In these presentations, you can see that my location is CBCC. And there I have my laboratory, the subfolder where I keep my laboratory projects. And on my laptop it could be at a different location. It doesn't matter, but somewhere you need to make this initial choice, and you can keep it simple like this. I also strongly recommend not to use spaces in your directory and file names. If you do, some things can break and cause a headache. It just happens to be that way, so I prefer not to use spaces. Alright, so the first step is that you would create this directory on your system, or some other kind of directory that you like. And there you'd need to download this file, the zip file. Just click on this zip file and download it somewhere. Okay, and make sure that you extract. So if this was your choice, like I have in my system, make sure that you extract the content of this zip file into this place, and the result of this, you can see that I have this subfolder CBCC GL262 Labs, and this is the content of this folder. So you should be able to generate this exact structure on your drive. Right, so these are the subdirectories that you can identify here. So the binary is where our executable files will be built, and if you switch from debug to release, they will be placed in either debug or release, but both debug and release already contain the required DLL files so that we can run OpenGL programs. The common subfolder here has C++ files that are shared between multiple projects. Okay, so there are some source files in this subfolder. Example contains various examples that we use in our lectures. The external subfolder is where I downloaded all of our third-party libraries. So they contain FreeGLUT, Glue, and GLM. We will examine the functionality of these libraries as we move forward with our laboratories. So this is something that you can use as I have, or you can actually download the later versions of these libraries. This is the very important folder where we're going to keep our laboratory exercises. This is the project that I used earlier in our presentation about basics of OpenGL, but when you download and extract the content of gl262labs.zip, it will contain two of these laboratory subfolders pre-built, pre-configured for you. And we also have models, which contains all of these objects with their geometry, configuration defined, which we can use in our projects.